I'm going to ask our next speaker to come up. And they've got an interesting perspective. There was an election recently, apparently. And I think a number of people probably thought after the election that a zero carbon Australia was probably further away than it had ever been before and was receding further and further in the rear vision mirror the further we travelled. Our next speaker, Stephen Bygrave, is going to come up here. He's the CEO of Beyond Zero Emissions. And he's going to suggest to us that a zero carbon in Australia is a lot closer than we actually think. And if there's been a theme so far throughout the talks that we've had and will continue, especially in the second half, it's that maybe it's not politics that's really going to change this. Maybe it's us. Stephen, please welcome him.
Good evening. I'm from Beyond Zero Emissions, and it's great to be here tonight. We are indeed living in a hothouse. The slide on the screen shows you, under a business as usual scenario, the kind of warming that we've got ahead of us. And if we're going to stabilise emissions and indeed reduce warming to less than 2 degrees by 2100, the blue line on the screen shows you the kind of radical emission reductions that are required. And on a per capita basis, Australia's not on this slide, but if you look at the USA there, which is the black line, if Australia and the US are going to play its fair share or their fair share of emission reductions per capita, the black line shows you the kind of emission reductions that are required in a very, very short time frame. So by 2020, essentially, Australia and the US need to move to zero and beyond. So at Beyond Zero Emissions, we've been doing a Zero Carbon Australia project. We firstly looked at energy. We showed 4 years ago that we can indeed have an electricity grid in Australia based on 100% renewable energy. We've recently released a report showing that we can have zero emissions buildings. Just again, in the last year, we've launched a high-speed rail project, which shows that if we have a grid based on 100% renewable energy, we can have high-speed rail, we can have electric vehicles, all with zero emissions technology. We're just about to release a land use report showing how our agricultural and forestry systems can move beyond zero emissions. In the pipeline, we have a renewable energy superpower project which will be launching next year, which shows how we can have an economy not based on fossil fuels, but indeed based on clean tech and renewable energy and energy efficiency. And our last piece will be industrial processes, showing how we can make cement, steel, aluminium, and other things, industrial processes with zero emissions. These are the reports we've released. They're available online, and the land use report, as I said, is just about to be launched. It's the last, the fourth study there. So looking at stationary energy first, obviously stationary energy, over 50% of our emissions in Australia, a fundamental sector to address first. And if you get a zero emissions stationary energy sector, it means that your buildings can be zero emissions, your transport system can be zero emissions. The stationary energy plan relies fundamentally on technologies that work when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, as the Prime Minister and Joe Hockey keep saying. In fact, you can have renewable energy technologies that work 24 hours a day. This plant ran for 36 days straight with 24/7 power. It relies on molten salt technology. Indeed, we have a display over here, which our volunteers can talk to you about afterwards, which shows you how this technology can work. We've seen dramatic uptake of solar PV across the world. This is not a revolution that's occurring in Australia alone. This revolution is occurring globally, and indeed will continue. That curve will continue to increase exponentially. As with wind, this slide shows you the dramatic increases in wind power cumulative capacity around the world. Indeed, in 2011, in Europe, the greatest new capacity installed was from wind. Next, we've looked at buildings, and indeed, we've shown that this is not a zero emissions building. It's not some funky new age kind of hippie-style building built in the sticks. This is your zero emissions building. It's your standard brick veneer, 3-bedroom home in the suburbs of Sydney, Melbourne, and around the country. We looked at every type of energy use in our homes, ranging from lighting through cooking, electrical appliances, etc. And we've come up with a number of strategies which show that we can indeed have zero emissions buildings and homes in Australia. This slide shows you the zero emissions possibilities in every home in Australia. The slide shows a step down from installing LEDs, insulation, double glazing, lighting, heating, ventilation and cooling upgrades, moving to a 75% reduction in energy consumption. And the big winner here, the left hook to the jaw, is the installation of solar PV. So you reduce your energy consumption, put on a standard 4.5 kilowatt hour kilowatt PV system, and indeed you become a net energy producer, not a net energy consumer. So our homes become renewable energy solar power stations. We've just launched a new initiative called Energy Freedom. This is an opportunity which gives me hope. It enables each one of you to join this initiative, supporting energy efficiency and renewable energy across Australia, encouraging governments across Australia to promote and encourage energy efficiency and renewable energy, which in combination means that every home in Australia can indeed be zero emissions. So please join up, join the movement which is growing rapidly. Our transport sector is critical, around 15% of our national emissions, and over 50% of that comes from vehicles, so very important to address the transport sector. Our high-speed rail project, people go, it's too expensive, there's not enough demand, there's not enough population in Australia to have high-speed rail. In fact, Sydney-Melbourne, the 5th busiest air route in the world. Sydney-Brisbane, the 13th busiest air route in the world. These air routes compare with Beijing, Shanghai. There is the demand for high-speed rail. It is cost competitive and indeed offers amazing benefits to Australia. We've looked at all of the construction and other elements to make this a reality in Australia. Electric vehicles, everyone goes, they're not high performing, they're not sexy, they don't look very good. Hey, this one looks pretty good to me. Again, 50% of our transport emissions come from electric vehicles, a critical solution for a zero emissions Australia. This report will be released in the new year and again, will reduce things like the fact that we import $20 billion of fuel in Australia every year. So taking all of those things together, this is my last slide. Let's all go beyond zero emissions. Let's all provide some hope here. With each of the reports we're doing, we can show that indeed we can, through stationary energy, buildings, transport, land use, we can indeed move beyond zero emissions. So join us, support our work, and look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.